Hello, Harkavy Committee. I really wanted to be with you for my 9th Harkavy Committee meeting in my time here at Cedar Village. And with the date change, unfortunately, even though I've been with you for 8 times synchronously, this time will be my first time with you asynchronously. Now, speaking of firsts, this is also our very first Harkavy Committee meeting with Majesticare now managing Cedar Village. And actually, you know, it's a lot has transpired since we last met in early March. And, you know, I just want to recap what's taken place since that last meeting. Since last meeting, one thing that has been continuously going on, whether we have programming in person or not, is the Shabbat newsletter. Now, this is a familiar layout, and I've continued to put out, I've now surpassed the 100th issue. And since the last time we met as a committee, I have published 15 of them. Also, with the change in management, I have also now, thanks to the help of the corporate marketing team, have new branding, have new visual branding for the Shabbat newsletters, which are now actually called Majesticare of Cedar Village Shabbat newsletter. And so I'm very excited that they have a new look, a new layout, and thank you so much to the corporate branding team for Majesticare. Touchdown programming. While there were some hiccups in the course of the transition and a little bit of the handing off, and we had a new cable provider, there were several weeks, probably about a month or so, in which there was no touchdown programming for the residents, but thankfully that has returned. Speaking of returning, regular in-person programming has returned. Now, if you recall, the last time that we met as a committee, we had been in for over it could have been like 2.5 months. We were in outbreak. We had the Omicron wave, it was going on, and really did not have in-person programming. Well, since we've had that meeting, thankfully we have been unencumbered by any outbreaks hindering our programming. So I'm very excited that we've had all sorts of in-person programming returning, including regular programming, such as Kabbalat Shabbats. So for Kabbalat Shabbats, we've held 15 Kabbalat Shabbats since we last met as a committee. 5 of them led by our TJF Academic Year Rabbinic Fellow, Ben Rosen. 4 by Jude and Irina in their wonderful monthly performances. 3 by some Chabad boys. Apparently, prior to the pandemic, Chabad boys would regularly be here speaking with residents on Friday afternoons, and that has returned. We've also had 2 led by yours truly and 1 by Claire Seid. The average attendance for Kabbalat Shabbats is 14 residents. That is actually the average. Although we usually receive 15 to 20 residents, and we've had even as high as 23 for Jude and Irina's March performance. So it was a little shaky really in March as we were returning to programming. And also one thing that's been great is that we're no longer subject to the strict separation between the SNF residents, the skilled nursing residents, and the AL and IL residents. Thankfully, they can participate in all programming, which is wonderful. Shabbat morning services. We have held 14 Shabbat morning services since the last Harkavy Committee meeting, 6 led by Ben Rosen, our TJF Academic Year Rabbinic Fellow, 5 by Rabbi Samantha Shapra, and who knows when she'll be back, because she just on Wednesday the 22nd had her 3rd child. So mazel tov to Rabbi Shapra. We've also had 2 led by Michael Evers and 1 led by Edie Yakutis, who you may remember as our 2020 summer TJF Rabbinic Fellow. And now out of these Shabbat morning services, we typically have about 5 to 8 residents in attendance. Now, we've also, perhaps the most popular program, look, Kabbalat Shabbats, people love coming to, but Wednesday bagel discussions are perhaps the most popular. It's neck and neck with Kabbalat Shabbat as far as most popular programs that I run, and these are Wednesdays. We have bagels. Now, I held off for April because between Passover and also the whole transition of management and ownership, we did not hold any in April. But our very first one was right after our last Harkavy Committee meeting, and that really kicked off our return to these Wednesday Bagels events. And we had, out of these 13 Wednesday Bagel discussions, I led 6 of them on a variety of topics, 4 of which were on holidays. I talked about Purim, I talked about Passover. I talked about Lag BaOmer and Shavuot, and also 2 other, one on mezuzah placement and one on yartzites. We've also had 4 that were organized by Hirsch Wise, inviting John T. Blackman to speak by Zoom about Israel. We've had 2 Jewish Federation events. One was Yardei Ne'eman, the community shaliach, speaking about Israel. We've also had Danielle Minson in her first time as CEO of Jewish Federation come and speak, which was really wonderful. Finally, we also had for Yom HaAtzmaut a live stream that we connected with the Meyerson JCC to put on, which was fantastic. Now, for the Wednesday Bagels events, we typically get about 15 to 20 residents, but sometimes we surpass 20 residents. Speaking of in-person programming, holiday in-person programming, we had Purim, which was right on the heels of the last Harkavy Committee meeting. That started off with Megillah readings. We had Megillah reading for the evening of Purim. We had Rabbi Chaim Heinemann of the Cincinnati Community Kolo come and read Megillah. We had the day of Purim. We had a couple of local Chabad students come and read Megillah. We also had Mishloach Manot, which I ran around the building distributing Mishloach Manot to our Jewish residents. And thankfully, thanks to the helpful people at the Cincinnati Hillel putting together those Mishloach Manot bags that I was able then to distribute to our residents. And there was also a Purim party that I helped organize and arrange, but really it was the Resident Life team. Thank you so much, Resident Life team, for putting that together. We had Passover was the other special holiday. Since our last meeting, we had a lot of things, but really let's just focus the Seder. The Seder was huge. There was a lot to do. It was a big to do, especially if you could believe it, it was the 5th day of Majestic Care. So there was a lot going on. It was a crazy time, but we pulled it off. It went well. It was our first in-person Passover Seder with out of building guests in 3 years here at Cedar Village, and it was nicely received. Actually, if you can believe it, there were a lot of compliments, both from guests and residents, about the food. So all praise goes to the kitchen for putting the food piece together. It was really wonderfully done. Other items, the 25th anniversary of Cedar Village. Cedar Village officially opened its doors on March 16th, 1997. So March 16th, 25 years later in 2022, the Bagels event. It happened to be a Wednesday. So for that Wednesday's bagel event discussion, I was talking about Purim because Purim was upcoming, but I did at least mention that it was in fact the silver anniversary. It was the 25th anniversary of the doors opening here at Cedar Village. And as far as I know, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, as far as I know, it was the only such commemoration or celebration in town for the 25th anniversary of Cedar Village. Also, you may remember when I threw out from July through mid-March, if you read the Shabbat newsletter, you would see that I had a regularly recurring history column. That's right, a Cedar Village history column. And I collated them right here in this work right here of all of those columns, because I'm not expecting anybody to go running around tracking down the Shabbat newsletters to find all the history columns. So I put them in one handy dandy publication right here that I collated them in. They are, of course, available in print, but also available online in a PDF. So you're welcome. It's free, it's available, and I'd love to hear your feedback and comments about that. I mentioned briefly earlier about Touchtown. A big piece was through the transition, we got Touchtown resolved. Now, there was a bit of a challenge because the cable got switched over and we didn't know what was going on for weeks, and then we had to cancel the contract because that was with Cardano, whatever. It was a big to do. But look, I know 2 years ago, this committee approved expenditures for Touchtown, so I'm very excited to report back to you that this is back online, actually doubly back, because one is broadcasting to the residents. That's been an ongoing offering I made available to certainly Beth has made available, but for Shabbats, I make certain lineups available for our residents. So I'm very excited that despite the transition time that we were able to get that back up and running. The second update with Touchtown is this has returned to working again. If you've been here, you know that this used to work with Touchtown, but as of January or February 2021, it stopped working. And thankfully over the last month, it's come back into operation. One other thing that I'm very excited about is a special presentation that I was able to publish in collaboration with David Harris of the Jewish Cemeteries of Greater Cincinnati, realizing that the 2-year anniversary of the onset of the pandemic had occurred, but also there were changes that were being made across Jewish funeral burial practices here in Cincinnati as things had gotten much better in our situation with the pandemic. And I realized this was a great opportunity. Look, when we think about 200 years of Jewish Cincinnati, it may only be 1%, but it's still 2 years of Jewish Cincinnati history, and that the funeral practices, the burial practices had been very much changed a lot in the last 2 years. And I'm very excited about that presentation that you are very welcome to watch featuring David Harris. Finally, because I know I always get questions about this, and I know you're always curious about this, what is the breakdown of our Jewish census? So starting off with AL and IL, here in Fountain View, 18 out of the 44 residents are Jewishly identifying, resulting in 41% of the residents here Jewish. And in Oakview, we have 21 out of 47, yielding 44.7% of the residents here in Oakview being Jewishly identifying. And in total for all of AL and IL, that's both Oakview and Fountain View, that is 39 out of 91, yielding 42.9% as being Jewishly identifying. And moving over to the skilled nursing floors, we have here at Cherry, our memory care unit, we have 5 out of 28 residents who are Jewishly identifying, yielding 17.9%. Here in our rehab units, such as Apple and downstairs in Azalea, 4 out of 41 residents are Jewishly identifying, yielding 9.8%. In long-term care, we have 21 out of 81 residents who are Jewishly identifying, yielding 25.9%. And this yields a total of 30 out of 150 as being Jewishly identifying, yielding 20%. So overall, all of Majestic Care of Cedar Village, we have 69 residents who Jewishly identify out of a total of 241, yielding 28.6% as Jewishly identifying here at Majestic Care of Cedar Village. With the spring behind us and already getting going with the summer, it's nice to have multiple months in a row unimpeded by any outbreaks preventing us from holding programming. And I very much hope that we're able to continue moving along swimmingly without any more hiccups, bumps, or otherwise with outbreaks of COVID-19. So it's really nice to have that going, and I'm excited as we get going with the summer to continue with the summer programming. And I'm of course very much looking forward to high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, Simchas, all those things unimpeded by outbreaks, and we'll see how we are able to go forward with the current situation as it is with the fall holidays. So I'm very much looking forward to planning all those programming. Now, of course, as we wrap up, I just want to make very clear that all Jewish life and programming here at Majestic Care of Cedar Village are thanks to the support of Jewish Home of Cincinnati, so thank you very much. I also want to thank you so much for listening, for hearing my report. And finally, I want to wish everybody a wonderful summer. Thank you so much.